Okay, good evening everybody. In this session we are going to only give some narrations for a lecture. I will send it to you in a PowerPoint format. Now this session, which will be a video format of a lecture, I'm going just to highlight some of the points that appear in the PowerPoint version of it. Now this session will be titled Peace Operations with Stabilization Mandates in Africa. Peace Operations with Stabilization Mandates in Africa. This presentation is meant to examine the implications of the AU's missions with stabilization mandates, the implications that this has on the African standby force, which I have already in one of the previous presentations defined. ASF is the African Standby Force, which is the instrument used by the AU to intervene militarily in some violent conflicts. Now it is worth noting that after the establishment, the African Union was faced with two challenges. The one is institutional building, and the other is the deployment of peace processes in different conflict situations and areas. As far as the institutional building, the AU, after it has been engaged in the establishment and operationalization of the African Peace and Security Architecture, APSA, you will find this abbreviation. APSA stands for African Peace and Security Architecture, which comprises a lot of components that fit in the AU peace interventions. The African Standby Force, ASF, is meant to serve as a peace operations and intervention instrument of the AU because it is a military component, and is envisioned to as being composed of multidisciplinary contingents, military components, with civilian and military also personnel in their countries of origin, and they are ready for rapid deployment at appropriate notice. This is the ASF. It is very important to memorize this abbreviation. Increasing role of the AU deploying peace interventions is of course indicative of the mounting conflict situations in Africa. This is commonplace. Now, the AU, since its establishment, has deployed a number of peace processes with stabilization mandates. These include the AU mission to Somalia, which is abbreviated as AMISOM 2007, and the African-led International Support Mission to Mali, AFISMA in 2013, and the African-led International Support Mission to Central African Republic, MISCA, in 2013. These are the three main peace processes with stabilization mandates. Now, stabilization is, in this context, refers to the mandates and tasks of peace operations whose main objective covers the elimination of identified spoiler armed groups and restoration of state authority to territories under the control of such armed groups, so that the country doesn't lose any part of it because of the insurgency of any rebel groups. Now, stabilization mandate is about using military means to stabilize a country, often with all necessary means, including military, to neutralize potential spoilers to a conflict. Therefore, stabilization missions are multidimensional. Now, the first stabilization or peace process with stabilization mission is AMISOM to Somalia in 2007, and in the PowerPoint presentation you'll find the many mandates and objectives of AMISOM. AMISOM was from the very beginning framed as a stabilization operation. AMISOM until 2011 operated mainly as a military operation, focusing almost exclusively on defending itself and the transitional federal government institutions in Mogadishu. There are so many, of course, objectives that this mission has to accomplish. However, as far as the efficiency of these missions is concerned, we will say similar missions, similar to AMISOM missions, were deployed to Mali and Central African Republic, of course. But still, the resources and logistics made available to these missions have made them, in almost all cases, ill-equipped to undertake the complete and the perfect stabilization activities. Now, there are now new threats to peace in African countries. Now, these new threats should inform some modifications on the mode of intervention by the AU, so that the missions also could cope up with the new threats to peace. Much of the threat to peace and security in Africa today arises from, unlike what was the case in the last century, from insurgency, acts of terrorism, and proliferation of militia groups and organized criminal networks operating in fragile and periphery conflict zones. Conflicts increasingly take the form of asymmetric warfare, in which hit-and-run guerrilla tactics, the use of increasingly sophisticated explosive devices, targeted assassinations, indiscriminate attacks on civilians, suicide and roadside bombings, and sniper fire have become common. These are the new threats to peace that we believe the EU and other continental organizations should frame their peace missions to address them. Now, these conflicts themselves and the situations that happen in consequence themselves lead to the collapse of state institutions and breakdown of law and order, as the case of the Central African Republic during 2013 has shown. And at a social level, these conflicts also create entrenched divisions and animosity among different sections of the society. Now, this has to inform the new context in which peace operations has to be tailored and designed. The context in which peace operations operate in Africa has thus become one that calls for a multi-dimensional approach, combining robust and comprehensive mandates and tasks, not only military one, but a comprehensive and multi-dimensional approach to achieve security and peace. These increasingly cover, among other things, counterterrorism and counterinsurgency, as well as combat operations to neutralize militant, insurgent, and terrorist groups, protection of civilians, supporting the building or rebuilding of security and rule of law institutions, providing for the rolling out and rebuilding of government administration and social infrastructure, and assisting in national reconciliation and peace-building efforts. You see, these are more or less closer to the traditional peace-building activities that used to be in the UN system. In the UN system. Now, what about the suitability of the African Standby Force, ASF, to address these challenges? The multidimensional conception of ASF makes it suitable for undertaking stabilization operations. On that, the report of the independent panel on assessment of the ASF observed that despite the steps taken to develop a multidimensional peace operations capability, progress has been uneven in the sense that there are aspects in which ASF succeeded in achieving these objectives, whereas there are other areas where SF did not do proper performance. This indicates that there are gaps. There is today a significant gap between the consensual peacekeeping model the ASF is designed for, a gap between this consensual peace building model and the actual peace enforcement and stability operations the AU has been called on to undertake in Somalia, Mali, and Chad. There is a gap here between the design and between the actual functioning of the process. Now, seen from the prism of stabilization missions and the requirements for the provision of rapid response capability, the ASF has proved to be not well equipped. That means it needs to be supported by some other element in either the design or in the efficiency of the actual practice of these missions. These are the most important points I've raised in the PowerPoint version of this lecture. So please refer to it so that you complement the picture of this session, which started peace operations with stabilization mandates in Africa. And thank you.